Okay, so here I am starting just a sketch layer, right? It's not rotoscoped, it's just freehand. And I am making it very loose. And I have it at a slightly lower opacity so that when I really want to make something clear, this is what I call a searching line, I can darken it just by overlapping it, right? Like the size of the eyes. Then how do I want to do the collared shirt and the sweater? You know, maybe something like this. And where do I want the eyes looking? Maybe something like this, right? And then where do I want the glasses? Maybe something like this. So this is kind of sketching out the vision. I'm going to round it out a little bit, make me look a little bit more Muppety. And then my ears are big enough, it's probably going to stick out a little bit on this side too. So, and then if I want to get rid of something, I can just use the lasso and trim it. I don't usually use the eraser when I'm doing digital painting or digital sketching. And the reason is because the eraser has brush functions too, and I want to stay really in control of consistent brush functions. Okay, so that might be my sketch. Now I can just do the base layer, the base painting on top of that. Now the beauty of the speed shape painting is it's also doing the base color, right? But you see the difference between a painting like this and a painting like this is kind of what you see with Jim Dine's work and William de Kooning's sketches versus William de Kooning's paintings. You can kind of integrate that energy into it if you want. And I can kind of have them all on, right? And then be informed by all of them as I move forward. And why not? I can do that. So what's the next phase? The next phase is refined paint. And you can do it in multiple layers. But notice how both of these, which I think are really great examples, they start with harder edges, and then only at the end do they start softening edges. It's a bad idea in general, with digital coloring, with digital painting, to start with soft edges. Because the computer's really good at softening edges. The computer's really bad at sharpening edges. So it's better to start really sharp. And this reference is kind of what I'm going for. You see how it's already pretty soft? I want it to be kind of sharp like this, because then I can always soften it. So my refined paint, this is what I'm going for. And it could be a mix of not outlines, but sketchy brush strokes going along with colored strokes. Whatever you're into. And it looks good from a distance, but up close you'll see that this does not pay off compared to actual paint, right? And so that's now what takes a lot of time and work and hopefully fun. It's building this up. So all of this, I am now going to lock all these layers, and I can blend them in on each other. So I'm going to take my sketch layer and I'm going to take it down a little bit. There we go. It's still there. I might even change its blending mode a little bit to something like multiply or overlay, linear light, because that will actually give me different tones, which are interesting. And then I'm going to lock it. Same thing here. I can take this and maybe find a blending mode that I like a little bit more. Maybe that gives some highlight, like that. Now I have a lot more variations to work with. Lock it. Then I keep my base painting there. And then I'm going to lock the references again. And the only layer I'm not using is this rotoscoped layer, because that's just too boring. Right. So I have all of these. Now I'm going to make a new background layer, duplicate the background, and now I'm going to fill the whole thing, edit fill, with middle gray. And it will show me where my brush strokes are. And that's the kind of thing I want. All right, now I'm ready. I'm going to lock that for my third aspect of digital painting, which is refined paint. And this is exciting, but refined paint I'm not going to do with just a standard brush. The other thing I want all of you to know how to do is how to make your own brush. So, save your work. You don't need to close it, but do save it and name it with your name, right? And what we're going to do is I'm going to say File New. We're going to make a new Photoshop file. Please, everyone, do this. You're going to like it. You are going to call it your name and then brush. And I'm going to do it for FA25 because I make a lot of these. Okay, and then for the size, you're going to do not inches. We're going to do it by pixels. And I like to design brushes on a 1000 by 1000 pixel square. So 1000 by 1000 pixels. Resolution doesn't matter because it's the pixels that matter. All the defaults will be a white background. You're going to choose the brush that you were last using, right? And then you're going to make it solid black. You can go all the way to this bottom corner, or you can just click on the defaults there. So it's black in the foreground. Okay, then you're going to make a brush. And this is what the brush would look like. The brush tip, if you dipped it in ink or pushed it up against like an ink pad and then pressed the tip of the brush onto a piece of paper. Now, those of you who enjoy lipsticks, you might know what blotting papers are. So you would put lipstick on, and then you would put this little square of paper up against your lips to blot it, to take off excess, right? So the texture of your lips comes through. That is what your brush will look like. Now you can make your brush any way you like, but this is going to give me a tapered flat brush, the kind of brush that William de Kooning used, the type of brush that a lot of kind of expressive oil painters use. You'll notice there's a lot of gaps to it. There's little flyaways from like random hairs. And it's going to be very different than the standard brushes in Photoshop. And then in the center, it might get pretty heavy. So now maybe I'll change it up a bit. I'll make it 100% hard, and then I'll take the size way down, and then I'm going to put it up to 100% opacity. And then I'm just going to scribble. Now notice I like to build it this way at a 45-degree angle. You can make it a round brush where it's like a circle, but this is now how you turn it into a brush. You go to Edit, and you say Define Brush Preset. And you can do this in Photopea as well. Same method. And it will be named after your file name. And that's my brush size. My brush size, as I designed it, is 941 pixels. So then I say OK. Now I'm going to select all, delete, fill it with white. And now I'm going to play with my brush. Deselect. So if I just tap it once, I get my brush. Right? But if I paint with it, that happens. That's not great. But the difference is now if I go to the brush settings, I can change the size of it, right? And so now I have my own brush. The problem is it's not pressure sensitive to size, and it's locked into a single angle. So when you zoom in on it, it looks like saw teeth, right? So the key to using brushes is brush settings. So I'm going to delete again. I'll just do it on a new layer so I don't have to keep on doing all that. So what we do now is this brush is now at the very bottom of your brush selections. So that's my Karl brush FA25. And if you want to know what it is, just tap once and you'll see what the brush is. There it is. But to make it usable, we want to go to Window and Brush Settings. And then they should live on the side here. And then the brush settings I always recommend, you can play with all of them, though they can get pretty complicated, is the first one, Shape Dynamics. They're just like layer styles, but for your brush. Shape Dynamics is incredibly important. This is, first of all, where we customize the control so that it is pressure sensitive. Which means it's no longer locked into one size. If I press lighter, it's thinner. If I press harder, it's thicker, right? Very important. Next, the size jitter. Because when you use a real brush, it is not always locked into the same size. So you'll see the brush stroke change as you change these settings. So I want the size just to change a little bit on its own. And even though it's still locked in the same angle, you see how that starts to look more natural? Because it's jittering a little bit. So I usually do a jitter of about 50%. Next, my favorite, the angle jitter. So this really changes it. Because when you use the brush, it won't always work at the same angle. So I'm going to do an angle jitter, pretty extreme, about 60%. And now this looks like a pretty messy, scumbly brush. If you want it a little bit more controlled, you can tighten that angle jitter to something that's a little bit smoother. Like 20%. Okay, lastly, this is all at 100%. So all that kind of texturing I did in my brush, it just gives you a little bit at the edge. And you can have it be more open or not, but you can also play with what's called texturing. So if I play with texturing, I can open up the brightness of the stroke and the contrast of it and the depth. And I do that with the grass texture or the water texture. Water is my favorite. I'm going to take that depth way down so it's like this. And now that's going to open up that brush so it's not always painting. Even when I have the brush at 100% opacity, there's going to be some texture and overlap to those strokes, which is perfect for a Muppet. All right, so that is customizing your brush. Now, check this out. I am going to do a screen grab of this. Those are the only things I play with. I play with shape dynamics and I play with texture. You can play with a lot of others if you like. Sometimes the wet edges is very helpful, depending on what you're going for, especially a watercolor look. But when I move over to here, those brush settings will still be intact, right? So this will be for my refined paint layer. But instead of painting with black, as long as I don't change brushes, I am now going to hold down Option, steal a color, and I'm going to take its opacity down. And I'll be on my refined paint layer. I can turn off the brush settings for now. And I saw you, Joe. I'll get to your question in a second. And then I start painting, right? Now the opacity I want is probably about 60%. And when I use it, this is going to give me a lot more clarity. So hold down Option, because even when I build up something light, you see how it's going to be textured. And it's going to layer in. And so I have to be really aggressive, and I can use bigger or smaller brushes, but I want to build up my refined paint at about 60% so that I am shaping the forms I want. And every time I overlap colors, it's creating a new color that I can then steal and use. And I can use that to blend, or I can use it for shadows, or I can use it for soft edges. I can bring some green into there. Play with the blues. And I'm showing you with the details on the eye, but again, this isn't about detail. I'm just kind of showing you how this refined paint will work.